Welcome to everybody who's joining this call. I'm so excited and grateful for every leader who's chosen to prioritize and set aside this time to be with us and with other leaders all around the world to connect and talk about a really important topic. If you haven't noticed, we've evolved our logo, and that is just to for you to connect with us better and with our heart. So you'll see we're gonna keep on improving and striving to close the distance to you, and the logo is just one way of expressing that. This meeting will be recorded, so please do pass it on when you see the recording. And if network allows it, please switch on your camera. It's lovely to see the faces of leaders all around the world. And if you can, then just stay on mute to not interrupt the conversation. And I almost want to say, most importantly, post questions in the chat. We've got some time for Q&A right at the end. And we've got such a deep thinking specialist today. I'm excited also for the time of hearing what challenges are in your heart. And we'll make some time to get to that. So if anything comes to mind as we speak today, pop it in the chat, write it down. Right at the end, we'll have some time for that. So as 54, we guide ministry leaders around the world on your next step as you strengthen the health of your organization and grow your impact. And we know it's an overwhelming and really challenging thing to do, but we're here to try and to support you in the way that you do that. And you can tap into this guiding that 54 does in three ways. The first is the 9D assessment that guides you into recommended learning. So it's overwhelming to know where to start, but the 9D assessment refines that for you. And then you go into the courses and the resources. That's such rich content that's rooted in biblical principles. And also live learning sessions like today. Those are the three ways in which you can tap into the guiding. And if you like conversations and engagements like today, you can also scan this QR code and be part of the WhatsApp group and the WhatsApp community where we post bite-sized pieces of content from these live learning sessions or just really great insights and bites. And you can also ask questions and connect with other leaders around the world. So we've loved being part of this and just feeling more connected to other leaders. So scan the QR code and you'll automatically become part of the 54 community. And you'll also be the first then to know of exciting things coming up, new webinar sessions coming up, or new courses and features being launched. So I hope to see you there. And just very quickly, the 90 is worth emphasizing because it's a great place to start your learning journey and your organizational growth and focus, because you evaluate your organization's health across the 9 dimensions. Like you would know, it's hard to know in your organization with so many things screaming at once, where's the best place to start? And this is such a helpful tool, a really powerful tool to help you with that and just to facilitate that process for you as a leader and for you and your team. And this will then show you where should you invest your energy? What is the next step you should take with your organization where you'll get the most return for the energy that you invest. Speaking about energy, this is something that we believe is, as leaders, we feel drawn to and called to a mission. And before you know it, you're running an organization. And it can suck the life out of you and the energy out of you that you actually wanted to pour into the mission. So this is at the heart of it, really, what we are coming alongside you with and supporting you in. And today's topic speaks directly to this, I think, especially this time of the year when we're starting to feel a little bit wobbly in the knees and the year's getting long. So Ian, what comes to mind when you think of energy and the topic that we are discussing today?
That's good, Nina. There's none of the dimensions carry the same possibility as stewarding people well, that people, teams, and values one. I think the possibility within that of us together focusing our energy onto the mission we carry is profound, actually. And I think this is a really important piece for us and the one that also brings the most challenge. So but let's get going and hear from the leaders on this, because I think it'd be great just to hear their feedback. And if you haven't yet joined AHA Slides, stewarding.com/54. Use the QR code or type it in. And the first thing that pops up is what one word comes to mind when you think about leading others. If you haven't yet put a word in there or want to add something else, go for it. But we've got some great things coming through. It is an investment. It's
Mm.
organic. It's about trust. It's about integrity. I love that. It's potential, right? The
Mm.
potential inherent within teams is remarkable. What word comes to mind for you, Nina?
Cool. Yeah. I want to say it's a good question, but we've thought of this question, but now hard to answer. I guess
Put you on the spot.
there's so many words, but opportunity
Mm,
came to mind for me now because it's so alive and it's
mm,
human. It is an opportunity. How we use it is a whole other story. And for
mm.
you?
Well, just as we were praying together before the time with Nadia, she used the word, it's messy. And we invite God
Yeah.
into the messiness of our humanity in this more than in any other space. And
Mm.
I think messy is a real part of our experience as leaders in when it
Yeah.
comes to people space. So yeah, let's move
Mm.
on to the next one. So, as you think about leading others, which three aspects of these five would you say challenge you most? Is it building team trust and unity? Is it around creating alignment on the vision? Is it right people in the right seats? We had that conversation a month ago with Dahlia. Is it inspiring productivity? Is it conflict resolution? Maybe it's something else, and you feel free to put that in the chat. Interesting. It's all of these are real challenges, right? And it's actually interesting as we run the 9D assessment with ministries, the one dimension where ministries rate themselves the strongest is on mission and vision. And so it doesn't surprise me to see that being the one that vision alignment is often like it's high, but it's not as high as the others. It doesn't surprise me.
Mm.
Let's do the last one, Nina. I'm so excited to get into the conversation with Nadia. So let's move on to the next question.
Sure.
When people in your team are thriving, what do you notice usually suffers first? Is it relationships in the team? Is it the work and or ministry goals? Is it the person's motivation and joy or the team's motivation and joy? Or is it for you as a leader, your own energy and focus that has impacted the most? What happens for you when you're and people in your team are thriving? Relationships in the team are a real challenge when we aren't thriving, and the motivation and joy is impacted significantly. In fact, I mean, in many respects, it's probably all of these. Hey, Nina?
Mm. Yeah, I would think so.
I think it's an important one for us because that again, going back to that energy slide, when we are thriving, our energy that we focus together on the mission is profound. So
Mm.
I think we need to get going with Nadia and Nina. Take us away.
Excellent. Me too. So excited. So we're going to start with John 1:14 that says the word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And what a joy that he walked among us, that he brought that grace and truth to us on earth. And as we go into this really important topic, we have the best example that we can look to. So we're going to be talking about, like I mentioned, stewarding people well. What does this wise stewardship of those entrusted to us look like? What does it mean? What is the cost if we don't do it? And we are joined by an incredible specialist, Nadia Kist. She's the executive director of Bloodwater. She's got 20 plus years of experience in leadership and equipping organizations and leaders across Africa. And she's also the co-founder of Seeds of Hope and on the board of many organizations. There's so much that I could actually say about her. But what I really want to emphasize is I saw the leader that handed over to Nadia spoke about her so beautifully and said that she brings the perfect blend of heart and strategic brilliance to the work that they do. Now, I think firstly, that's an amazing compliment. But secondly, I must say that I agree. I've met with Nadia a few times, and even in the first meeting This is such a good description of her blend of heart and strategic brilliance to the work that she does. Nadia is a deep thinker and she walks with inspiring courage. What that means in what I've saw is in what I've seen is that she chooses to do what is right over what is easy and what is comfortable, especially when it comes to this topic. She challenges the norms of society and she brings true transformation in her organization by radically following the example of Jesus. So I'm very expectant of this conversation. And Nadia, maybe before I start with the first question and we go into the session, it would be good to hear your voice. So won't you just say hi to everyone and maybe just give us one sentence of why this is so close to your heart?
Thank you, Nina. Thank you so much for all of those words. We didn't talk about this part of the of the session. I wasn't expecting or prepared for that. I'm so grateful to be here and to meet everyone in the room. I'm just so in deep admiration of this community and what 54 Collective is cultivating. It matters so much that we as leaders are being poured into. And why this matters so much to me is because I have sat on both sides of stewardship, of being stewarded and feeling the impact of that when it is done with great care and intentionality. And I have experienced when it has not. I am also in a position now and in even previous roles where I was entrusted to steward others. And I have, in some seasons or circumstances, done that really well. And there are some circumstances where I did not. And on all of those configurations of experiences, there is things that stay with you and shape the way that you begin to live with others and lead others. And so it has become a really important part of my journey in leadership, as well as like in the work that I am currently doing with Bloodwater, having newly been appointed in the role of executive director and moving from a team to an entire organization that is across 2 countries and different cultures, and at a time when, you know, Bloodwater as an organization is, we exist to resource and strengthen African-led organizations that are responding to end health disparities in communities in East and Southern Africa specifically. So this is also at a time when, you know, the commitments to global health have been severely dismantled, and that is creating so much strain and worry and tension and difficulty for organizations that are on the front lines doing. And so that adds an element of pressure to a partner like us that feels so compelled and implicated to lean in deeper. And so it's all of those things that are kind of coalescing at the same time. And still, I remember when I was, you know, considering this role, one of the things that I was really seeking the Lord about was like, if this is his invitation to me, and how do I kind of hold all of those different pieces that are happening, and am I able, you know, all the things that you as a leader would just negotiate and really try to sit with, like, is this right? Can I do it? And is now the time? And I just remember feeling a deep impression of like, your responsibility is to steward the people and I will take care of the rest. And so it really has been like a big mark for me, why this topic has been so top of mind and so almost like all encompassing of other things around organizational leadership and health. There's always a thread that I can connect back to what's happening with the people and how we're leading, managing, but ultimately like investing in people.
Sure. I love what you said there, that thread that's connecting back. Whatever happens in the organization, how you can connect it back to the people to not think it's disconnected. And so the word stewardship has been used a lot for many things, and we often connect it to perhaps resources, finances, time, even. But we're talking about stewarding people well. So what does it mean to steward people well? What does it mean to you, and why does it matter?
Yeah, exactly as you said, Nina. I think the first thing that comes to mind, I'm going to raise my voice a little bit. The first thing that comes to mind is we think of finances and how are we doing with the financial resources that are entrusted to us in the organizations that we're leading. And so I pause and go back. In an earlier lifetime professionally, I worked very much in like the world of research and monitoring and evaluation. So I always like to, I'm compelled to go a step back and ask the question of what does that word mean? Like how is it actually defined? So I, looked this up in the dictionary, and the definition that I came to from the Merriam-Webster dictionary specifically is the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care. This definition gives us scope and standard. It implicates responsibility, it implicates trust, accountability, but it's silent on ownership, it's silent on time or permanence, and it is completely vague on what. It doesn't say finances. It actually says that good stewardship as a principle, we can replace something to all things. And if we think about that in the context of being leaders of institutions that are mission driven, we are stewarding time and treasure, and we are stewarding opportunities and people and infrastructure. And we can, you can continue to break that down and list it depending on, what is your scope or your specialty. And I really believe that if we think and reframe the invitation of leadership to a period, a season, and a scope of being entrusted in something to be responsible for, to hold with great care, and to manage well, that it would have a different weight of responsibility, or even a different kind of measure of what we call success or results than if we only thought about it through that one dimension of something that you can cost or look at through the lens of finances only. And I think, the greatest example of the importance of stewardship, there are many, but my favorite is in the parable of the talents in Matthew 25. And the idea that how well we steward, how responsible we are, how we consider the significance of what we are given, irrespective if it is one or little or many, is directly relates to what we ultimately have the capacity to be entrusted with, that like multiplication. And I often think about when you are trusted with little, you can be trusted with much. And all of those things really kind of come up for me when I think about why stewardship matters and why having the right definition of it in the context of leadership and perhaps the most significant resource, which is people.
Nadia, that was so good what you said about the most significant resource being people. And that's why I'm so grateful we're talking about stewarding people. And to unpack what it means to steward people, that's a bit of a gray cloud in my head, or it used to be before I spoke about it with you. When it really became real for me was when you unpacked it at the hand of how Jesus has done it. So could you tell us more about, when you look at his example, what does it mean and how did he steward those entrusted to him?
Yeah, I want to, before responding to that, I just want to say, similar to what Ian was referencing in our just time together just before beginning the session, is like, I just want to acknowledge that this is exceptionally hard and it is not linear. And even just to what I shared at the opening, like I can look at moments past and present where I feel like I am really dialed in and intentional and moving with great care, and also it could be as close as the very next day completely like missed the mark. And to hold the example of our Lord, who is, perfect and sinless and was able to hold divinity and humanity without any, both concurrently, inseparable, and we cannot. It feels, like a daunting kind of blueprint to look at. And that's where I find the importance of starting with Jesus modeled to us an incarnate leadership, and what that really means for us, and what scripture tells us the significance of that is in terms of then what he is giving us an example for as being very accessible and very possible. And that we don't have to always get lost in the ideal perfection that is completely unattainable in our human skin, and feel like then there's no other option. And so I just want to kind of lean into that incarnate leadership and really hold, he became flesh and he dwelt among us. And in Hebrew, as just to the scripture that you read in John, but also in Hebrews chapter 4, where it says that he understands our humanity and sympathizes in our weakness, yet he was without sin. That there is an importance of him being in our human experience. He moved and led from a place of deep compassion, deep understanding, empathy, and humility, specifically referring back to even Philippians chapter 2, verses 6-8, that says, though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God something to be grasped, but emptied himself. That these are all things stepping into the human experience to make completely accessible to us the things that he has modeled for us, means that to steward in the footsteps of Christ is something that we can actually hold. He led from all of those places, compassion, understanding, empathy, and humility, because he stepped into the human experience and did it in the same containers that we are moving in and living in right now. He saw people as whole. And that to me is what the incarnate leadership model gives us, that we can be called and also flawed at the same time, and that he still invites us to partner with him, that it is not, we are disposable because we are flawed, we are unusable, there is no place for us, or that we can only lean in and be a part of the work that he is calling us into if we get it right all the time. So for us, it's really remembering as leaders that we're all in the same condition. It is us and the teams that we lead, the people that we are investing in and building, we are all in the same condition, and that we are not far apart from one another just because of a title or tenure or years of experience. So even to be called a specialist in this is a really difficult thing to hold, because like I said, I could step into tomorrow and just by the mix of circumstances or my state of mind or something that I experience outside of my workplace, I step in here and I'm acting like I had never managed a person ever, even though I'm 20 plus years in my career. And so it really is remembering that we are all walking in the same shoes with the same vulnerabilities, with the same set of limitations, just by virtue of being in our human condition. And in that ability of Christ to model calling people in their humanity with all that they come with as a whole package, is to see the example of him investing deeply in 12, even though he knew that one would betray him, some would fall away, others would be scattered, some wouldn't even make it to the end. They would be offended earlier on and walk away. And yet his invitation was persistent. And it was all inviting. And so I just think that that's a really important starting place to frame when we think about the other ways in which he modeled for us. He stewarded people. This to me is one of my favorite. He stewarded people and their development differently. That he was able to lead, appreciating that his disciples, his followers even more broadly, but more specifically, those that he discipled, were all of unique personalities, giftings, experiences of life. And those experiences of life shaped them all to be very distinctly different people. He did not lead for uniformity of his disciples. He cultivated individuals. He met each person at their point of need, at their point of potential, their readiness, and he called forth who they would become in partnership with him. And it was not just about managing who they were and what they were bringing to the table in that moment. I think this for me is one of the most important expressions of how Jesus stewarded the disciples. And I just wanted to unpack a few examples, although there are so much more than just the few that I've come up with here. We look at John, who you can kind of distill down to being the tender-hearted disciple. Jesus led him through intimacy, trust, and revelation. Thomas, who we can distill down, this is oversimplified, I know, just bear with me, the questioner. Jesus led him with patience, evidence, and personal encounter. James and John, who were highly ambitious, competitive, Jesus redirected them in his leadership to have ambition that was service-oriented. Mary Magdalene, who was, by all accounts in that society, gravely marginalized, he led her into deep participation, significantly giving, learning, serving. Peter, who is passionate, impulsive, zealous, Jesus stewarded him by allowing him to experience failure. And Judas, who was the betrayer, Jesus led with grace and opportunity to turn. And so when we hold all of that, we think about the way in which he had one mission, one invitation, and a diverse mix of people who were coming to him to be empowered to then be the 12 that brought it out for all of humanity for generations to come. And he was able to hold the differences of who they were, calling them to who they were purposed to be, not what the world said about them, not what society kind of named them, shaped them, positioned them to be, but he did it based on what they were able to grow into in partnership with him. And he did it with great patience. not everyone also is held to the same responsibility, even though they have the same calling. So even looking back to Peter specifically, not everyone carried the same weight of what Jesus spoke over him in terms of being the rock upon which the church would be built. That wasn't something that he said to all, but still all were called. And so I think it matters that we are really able as leaders with teams of various sizes and scopes of complexity, to remember that it is not about everyone looking the same, showing up the same, being held accountable to the same blueprint of what it means to show up and be the best of who we need them to be, but really to meet them with how they are formed, and then let that be the starting place of cultivation. And I also just want to say, I thought this earlier, but it didn't come out. There is a core assumption that I hold in all of this, which is that I really believe that people, all of us, all people are wanting to be their best and bring their best to what they are committed to. It doesn't always reflect in that way, but that's really what is at the heart of all of us. I think that's a common ground that we have to remember, that in the differences of experiences and circumstances that it is expressed not always in the most optimum way. But if we can work from that place of holding that core assumption, it really reframes also how then we are navigating the differences, the uniquenesses of personalities, and even just like then the difficulties of when all of these distinctly different people are put together in one organization around one mission and asked to move forward towards a common goal. He also stewarded relationships, not results. And he did it with proximity and presence. And those two things are something that really, again, going back to Christ as our incarnate Lord, is really important, proximity and presence. That there's a scripture in Mark 3:14 that I love. It says, he appointed 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach. And they don't exist separately. He didn't send people out in the absence of them being called first to be with him. It was in their proximity, the disciples, it's in their proximity to him that they got what they needed to do the work, to fulfill the call, to actually exist above the circumstances of their limitations, but not become unlimited at any moment. He modeled to them what leadership, what fulfilling the work, the kingdom work would look like by living with them, eating with them, by washing their feet. They saw Christ as vulnerable with the full range of his emotions, up close and personal, weeping under pressure in the garden, in all of his glory on the mountaintop, in the moment of the transfiguration. They saw all of it. And that you only have when you are in deep proximity and relationship with someone, to see someone in all seasons of life. And he often invited them to go away from the crowds, to rest, to be in community together, to learn and to be filled. And there are opportunities for both, and it's knowing when there is the going out and doing the work and the coming back to pause and rest. And so he really did kind of lead, giving us a close blueprint of how to move through all the seasons and circumstances of life and human emotion, just because of the way in which he stewarded relationships, but did not think first about what their result was going to be. He was thinking about them. And I think that there's a lot for us to remember about that. And I think the example of even Mary and Martha, of just reminding Martha that Mary had chosen the better place of being at his feet, close to him in a moment of pause, that the work is going to get done ultimately. And so I think that there's something there for us to remember. He also stewarded them with a posture of surrender. I think I struggle with this a lot. Maybe some other people in the room can as well. modeling that we are in partnership with the Father, as referenced in Philippians. But the example that is the most powerful for me is almost the entirety of John 17, when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he was in that state of that most pressured state just before he endured the cross. That there was a time to be together with his disciples, and he knew it. He knew that that time was short and brief. And so he stewarded the time that he had with them really well, to impart on them everything that they needed to be prepared, to be equipped, to go back and be entrusted. It wasn't to go out. He entrusted them back to the Father. And I would just point everyone to John chapter 17, verse 11, where he says, I will remain in the world no longer, but they are still in the world. I am coming to you. And he entrusted his followers and everyone that would be connected to them ultimately back to the Father. And I just wonder what it would look like for us, going back to the definition of stewardship, where it is silent on time or permanence, if we really took every opportunity, every season, every relationship that we are invited into be a steward of for a time and a season, but that we remember to entrust back to the Lord. And it could be because there is a transition that happens. Some people, join our teams, exit our teams, and that was not the frame of reference, again, that we considered how well we are leading is whether people stay, but that we are holding that responsibility with open hands just for the time that we have, irrespective if it is for an hour in a meeting or if it is for 20 years through the length of your tenure in an organization. The last thing that I would just like to share is to remember also that in all of these things, he was really clear about what he stood for, knowing that it would be hard, knowing that it would be a message that would be hard for people to receive, knowing that some people would not accept it, but connecting back to the parable of the talents, for whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. It's holding the weight of what is sometimes difficult. What is, even if it is not difficult, it is a responsibility that carries a weight. And on the flip side of that, to finish that verse in Matthew 25, whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. That if we moved really with the sensitivity of what the costs could be if we are not stewarding people well, I think we would take a lot more seriously the need for us to be really clear about what our standards are, what what the expectations are about what we stand for as leaders, what our organizations are calling us into in terms of aligning around mission and values, and what is our reason for existing, and not taking it as casually as thinking that it may or may not matter how well people are being treated in the mix of all that. Remembering also that nothing matters more to the heart of the Father than people. I think I'll stop there.
Incredible. Wow. That is so good. I just quickly want to reiterate and bed down the 5 core things that you said, Nadia, that Jesus modeled an incarnate leadership and therefore understands what it means to be human, called and flawed. I just love that. He stewarded people and their development differently. That was so beautiful. I think you said specifically, he called forth who they could become and not just managed who they were. That was so profound. He stewarded relationships, not results, and he did so with proximity and presence. He stewarded them with a posture of surrender. giving them back to the Father, and he was clear about what he stood for. That's such a helpful framework in this overwhelming thought of what does it mean to steward people well. And you mentioned this core belief and common ground that we all want we all want to be our best and give our best. So if someone is not that, then does that mean that it's a stewardship thing? Is that the level of responsibility we're taking up here? And how does that show up? Does that make sense, what I'm asking? Like, what does it look like when someone's not stewarded well?
Yeah, I think to answer just that question directly, just like if someone is not being their best or bringing their best, does it mean that they're not being stewarded well? I think it depends. It's not just a yes or no. But again, just kind of, let's just hold that as a core assumption across the board, that if everyone wants to be their best and do their best, everyone wants to be a part of a team and know that their part matters and is needed. And in a lot of ways, that means that leadership is aligning the people. Again, this goes back to what is our responsibility to care well for not just mission, but the people that are positioned to lead and execute on the mission, to make sure that we are aligning the right people in the right seats. And I love that that was your previous session. Having the right people in the right seats matters for the work to actually go forward and be done well. It matters that all the seats are filled well. And then when we advance the mission from a place of flourishing and common unity, community, I love kind of breaking that down as common unity. We can think about that even reflected in the body of Christ, that all parts have relevance and serve the whole, irrespective if they, again, referring back to Peter, don't all have the same significance that we would naturally feel. So when I do think that when people are stewarded well, that there is a connectedness to being in the right seat, being aware of whether or not all the seats are filled, and there actually being common unity, the alignment around the things, the most important things that keep us in one spirit, in one mind, with that one common goal. So I think it really does look like, at an individual level and a team level, it looks like flourishing, being in a really good flow with one another. People are growing, mistakes are happening. It's not about, these like flawless experiences, but there's a learning that's happening. Someone once told me that they had a leader that said to them, I'm okay with you make mistakes, but I know you're not going to make the same mistake twice. And it's just that, like, being dialed in enough to know, to be teachable as the work is evolving, as the environment or the context is shifting, that you're also kind of moving in flow together and adapting and responding. That kind of nimbleness, I think, is a real mark of just good stewardship over the whole, but kind of connecting back again, that thread to people. It looks like trust. It looks like deep camaraderie, community. It looks like alignment around mission, not being right at an individual level, not being an organization that protects preferences, individual preferences or opinions, but the things that you have committed to as the common ground of the reason for existing as an organization. It looks like rest. It looks like healthy scopes of work that are well-defined at a very kind of tactical, operational level. It looks like each person being able to do their part fully with capability and with trust. And I think that on the flip side of that, how we know when there is a stewardship problem, I think that it shows up in the opposite of that. And it's not all at once. It is a slow aggregating, a lot of issues in organizations that are connected to people stewardship that I have experienced or even have heard from peers and colleagues when, we just kind of even exchange ideas around what we are navigating, they were not these big catastrophic failures or, scandals. They were like small, everyday decisions of the things that leadership was silent about or passive about, and they aggregated. And so that to me is when I know, Nina, you and I have talked about this a lot, the idea of like being a person who is counting the cost of poor stewardship in an organization, that it's not just about turnover or productivity, but that it really looks like a slow aggregate of frustration, misalignment, repeating missteps, not actually being a learning, teachable organization as a whole. It looks like slow diminishing results, blame shifting, avoiding responsibility. It looks like roles that are tailored to fit people, but not people to fit functions and to flourish in a function, to own and to grow. It also can sometimes just look like stagnation, which for some may just be okay. You're not declining, but you're also not growing. It looks like mistrust, and it can also look like burnout. So I think it really can cut across a wide spectrum of symptoms and also implications. And I really care about having conversations with people around counting the cost when it is those very small, everyday decisions that we can feel in the way that we relate to one another. We can see just in very small, like we missed that. That we weren't ready to respond to that opportunity when it came our way. And rather than be like, oh, next time, we'll get it right next time, but really feeling like what that could have meant, what that could have brought to the work, to the mission, how that, again, if that's a talent, we don't know what the multiplying impact of an opportunity that God is giving us could be, if it's not in a form that we expect it to. And so really kind of seeing all of those things as really weighty losses if we are not kind of set up with the right posture or framing in mind.
Goodness me, so good, Nadia. You said earlier in this answer, all parts have relevance and serve the whole. And that was so good for me because it breaks down probably the most important thing that we call to as leaders is to steward the people, because all parts have relevance and serve the whole. And a lot of the other things in our organization are impacted by this specific thing. To not count these small things you've just mentioned as inconsequential, but to really see that. And listening to all of this sounds a little bit overwhelming, to be honest, to think of the example of Jesus, that really high blueprint, how he knew every single person that he was entrusted. My question is, how can the leaders on this call do that? They have many things on their plates, organizations to run. How do they know the people they're entrusted well enough to lead them uniquely? How do they make sure all parts that have relevance and serve the whole are healthy? Yeah. How do we steward our people well?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to just say, well, it's the 5 things that we talked about. It's many more than just that, but I think it's like really kind of moving in the ebb and flow of what is based on where you are, how you relate to your team, how long you've been in the seat or in this role with this organization, what season is the organization in, that one of those kind of 5 elements or 5 examples really lends to a place for you to lean into in the moment. Like even just to think about one of the questions that you framed there, it's like, how do you know your people? That's a proximity and presence thing. That's you are doing that happens over time. That's not like I'm going to commit in the next 3 months to know everyone on my team. Like that, just, you can't, a lot of these things can't be authenticated based on a decision, but that is like, you're every day doing it. And I think that for me, again, it's like Christ as our incarnate example. He lived it every day in the moments that he was ministering and in the moments when he was pulled away at rest. It was an all the time doing that work. It was who he was. I think there's something there about, for us, connecting back to who we are and how much of this, and it could also be just many of us are strained. Many of us are in our own right facing potential burnout. We don't have the right bench around us to kind of support some of the things that we don't have enough resource to get. There's always something that's missing. And I think in that we can get in the, get caught up in the doing that we forget who God is asking us to be. And first, that is his children, before it is ever that we are his servant. And I think we just have to kind of dial back to those very kind of simple, important points of identity and framing before thinking about then what we need to do and which of these elements then become the pathway to like getting it right. Because it would be all of them at any given point and more. There's so many more. So it's probably even before that. It's the stepping back into like, who are we and why are we here? Yeah, and maybe there's something that I wanted to say and it just kind of slipped through my mind earlier. My pastor, who I referenced earlier, who does a lot of leadership coaching with me, every time that I am really sitting with him talking about, let's say, a people management, I think we can all agree that to some extent, people management stuff is really the messiest. It's the hardest. It's the thing that is like, we just want to pass the buck to somebody else, And every time I sit with him and, often from a place of feeling like really justified of like, can you believe it? And this is what I need to figure out. The first thing he says to me is, aren't you so glad, Nadia, that on your worst day, like Jesus was so patient with you? Or, aren't you so glad that you are not defined by that one mistake that you made 5 years ago in that role that you held? And the moment that he says it, it's like, yep, that's right. And it's also, I think, remembering that again, we are all in the same skin with the same human limitations. And we have common ground of complete fallibility, complete brilliance, and everything in between, those two extremes. And we are not different or far from every single person on our team that we are leading and entrusted to steward. And I think even just holding that helps us to rethink what we are asked to do, because then we can think about what is the grace and mercy and intentionality, and in some cases, discipline, feedback, correction that we would want first. And then how do we then from that place offer?
Yeah, what a strong way to end that. Thank you, Nadia.
Nadia, the only question we are going to ask you to answer is when you're going to release a book, because this is you've got a lot of depth and richness in what you've said there, and I almost feel like I want to go through this again. If you do have any questions that you want to, that are just really burning for you, or you haven't had a chance to put in the chat, just get in touch with us, Nina at 54.global, or with myself, Ian at 54.global. We love to be in touch with you and to connect with you. So just to say, there's our very own Nina is going to be doing a session next session in November, which is about leading with calm in uncertain times. And Nina and I have had some discussions about the content of that, and I'm really excited about what Nina's going to bring for us. And her rooting in neuroscience, but faith together with that is quite profound. So if you haven't yet registered, this is going to be a great session. There are also some great courses that are on the 54.global site. If you haven't yet signed up for courses, please go and enroll. Last month, we had a really amazing time with Dalia Nassar, and I am excited to let you know that her courses are up and on the site. And if you haven't yet had a chance to go through those or see those, go into 54.global, get signed up, register. You'll see there are 4 different courses that are available. And so Dalia's work there has been exciting and really outstanding. So, and then finally, what are we going to do next? Should we? Oh, yes. If you haven't yet joined the WhatsApp community, here it is again. We're going to deal with those questions in the WhatsApp community. So please do take a moment and join that. And if you miss this, just email us. We'll add you to it. It's not a problem. That is it. Thank you. Nadia, you've been a real gift to us today, and we're so grateful for just your incredible inspiration. You've really drawn us deeply into scripture and into how Jesus led. And so thank you for taking us there in such a profound way. It's been very rich. It's going to be a real challenge for us to narrow this down to the bite-sized chunks because there's been so many nuggets in there, but we're going to do our best to give you the nuggets from today on the WhatsApp channel as well. So look out for that. So yeah, bless you all for being here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your time. And as you lead and steward people well, may you know God's grace to see each individual as God sees them. So yeah, bless you as you do that. Thank you, Nadia.